So we're going to cover Eternals Thanos Rising, #1. This is one of those one-shot books that Marvel put out to tie into a certain series going on at the moment. And when it comes to this one here, it's really more of, hey, we are trying to retell you the origin of Thanos, or we're trying to retell you how Thanos is connected to the other Eternals and why he is so important when it comes to the Eternals. And so this book does a pretty good job helping out new readers jump into the idea of learning more about the past of Thanos, but also the past of the Eternals as well. And honestly, for me, for somebody who wasn't really big on the Eternals, this was a great read. To sit down and learn actually how Thanos is involved when it comes to the Eternals, but also why he's so connected to them and why he's so important as a failure for the Eternals. And so to begin today's video, we have to jump back 200,000 years ago to be reminded that when it comes to the Eternals, they are a very old race. With that being said though, 200,000 years ago, they were basically having a war known as the Titan Schism. Now this war came out of one simple argument. Should the Eternals reproduce? That was a very big question right there, because when it came to the Eternals, they had no need to reproduce to keep their line alive, because even if they die, the Great Machine, and we learned this in our last video, has the ability to bring them back to life. And so they never had to say, oh, you know what, let's go ahead and mate and let's have some children. They had no need for that, except one day somebody said, hey, what would happen if we are able to reproduce and mate and have children? What would happen? Now, on top of that, you then have folks say, what would happen if we are able to mate with other races across the universe, even humans on Earth as well? It could lead to more powerful characters, more powerful beings. Now, they were correct. The problem was, though, this led into an argument, because even though you had Eternals begin to do that, began to mate with other races, including humans, and producing children, those children were technically not Eternals. Well, to most Eternals, they looked at them as a failure or something else that's not really part of the Eternal line. And so when it came to two brothers, it led to an argument that led into a war, because Alars feel like when it comes to Eternals, even if they do mate and being able to reproduce children with other races, those children are still technically Eternals. They should be part of the Great Machine, meaning that if they die, the Great Machine should be able to bring them back to life. But his brother Zuras, and we saw Zuras in our last video, he said no, that basically these Eternals or these beings are nowhere close to being Eternals. There's something else, something different. And so because of that argument, it led to an all-out war. Now in this war, you have Sprite confront Alars, and the reason why, because their mother, Zuras and Alars' mother, is saying it's time to call for a ceasefire to find a way to have a peace treaty between both sides, because this war is tearing the Eternals apart. And so this next section leads into a great conversation. And what I mean by that, it tells us how families work when it comes to the Eternals. And what I mean by that, when it came to the Celestials, when they came to Earth, all they did was came down and said, bam, 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 let's create some different races. And then they created the Eternals, but then they left. And so after they were made, you didn't have the Eternals say, hey, we should make up families. And so they begin to tell each other what they are to each other. Like, hey, I'm your brother. Hey, I'm your father. Hey, you're my mother. Hey, you're my daughter. That's how it went for them. And so right now for Zuras, but also Alar, yes, they are brothers, but in reality, they are not. And the same thing for their mother. Yes, she's their mother, but in reality, she's not their mother. Either way, this is her saying, I'm trying to find a peaceful way to end this war. And she says, I agree with Alar, because what she is saying is that it will probably be a good idea for Eternals to reproduce, to make more of us, to have children here. But at the same time though, she's also saying, listen, it could lead to problems down the road. And so I agree with Zuras. This could possibly be a bad idea. And so what she wants to do is she wants to exile her son Alar, saying, hey, go away. When you go away, do your whole experiment out there and then come back and tell us how great it is. Once you're able to do that, we then say, you know what, Alar was right. We should have children and then add those kids to the great machine. But for right now, you have to leave. You are exiled, because Zuras is right. This could be a problem down the road. This is the safer route. And when it comes to Mother, she also says every single Eternal will be mind wiped so that they will not remember this war, but at the same time, not remember what led to that war. The huge argument about the idea of Eternals reproducing, having children. And so every single Eternal except her and Alar and also Zuras remembers what happened when it came to that war, what led to that war, and what was the final solution for that war. But while you have Alar beginning to leave for his exile, he does say one thing that he needs to do first before he's able to begin his experiment, which is that he needs to find a lover. And the reason why, because he's saying, if I'm going to do this experiment, I want to make sure the child comes from my line, because this is my experiment. It makes more sense for me to be involved, heavily involved in my own experiment. And so he says, I'm going to find another Eternal that was also exiled. If I'm able to get her and make her fall in love with me, hopefully we'll be able to produce a child. And we'll see what happens next when it comes to that child. And we see him go over to Titan. And the reason why, because he's looking for a particular person. Now, when it comes to Titan, at this point in time, it was completely wrecked. I mean, completely wrecked. Either way, the person that he is looking for is a woman known as Sui-San. Now, when it comes to Sui-San, she belonged to another group of Eternals that were all exiled, except when it comes to her group, she's the last person standing. The rest have all died. Now remember, when it comes to Eternals, even though they die, they come right back to life. And so when it comes to her group, yeah, they did come back to life back on Earth. And as soon as they were brought back to life, they were locked away in the Excluded. And remember, the Excluded is an area where Eternals go if they are technically, being locked up for doing the wrongdoings. Either way, when it comes to Mentor or Alar, he is saying, hey, I need your help. I want to prove something here. I want to prove that if two Eternals are able to come together and reproduce a child, that child will still be a great Eternal, possibly something even better. Now, at first, she's kind of like, so your goal is to find a way to seduce me. Really? You came all the way out here to just get some, to prove a point to your mother and father and the rest of the Eternals. But apparently, she says yes. And they begin the process of actually changing Titan into something better, but they also fall in love. And over time, when it comes to Alar and Sui-San, they were able to turn Titan into something new, something beautiful, a brand new colony on there. You had different kinds of races, and Eternals live on that one particular area. Here's the thing, they were still unable to produce a child. And so even though other Eternals were able to, have children, have life, found love, all those things, well, when it comes to Alar and Sui-San, yeah, they found love. Yeah, they got married thanks to Kronos, but at the same time, they were still unable to have a child. And so you had Alar run to his father, Kronos. Now, I'm not going to sit down and try to dive too deep into Kronos, but when it comes to Kronos, he's a very powerful character. And what he says to his son Alar is that, I can give you a son, but the thing is, I'm not going to give you a son out of wedlock. meaning that you have to marry her. And so we do see Sui-San and also Alar get married. And right after that, well, he does give them a child. And so when it comes to this child, it's a great achievement for Sui-San and Alar. And you have Alar say, I want to name this child Thanos. And so this is where Thanos was conceived, but at the same time, it leads to his birth. And we already know it went downhill from there because Thanos is pure evil. And so after he lived for a few years, bam, he killed off his mother. And once she was able to come back to life on Earth, thanks to the Great Machine, she was also excluded, locked away forever, because let's not forget, she was also exiled as well. And so with her being exiled, they're like, oh, hey, you're finally here. So it's time for your punishment and you're going to be locked away. Goodbye. Now, when it came to Alar, he was still alive. And he was upset with Kronos because Kronos was the one that gave him Thanos because they could not conceive a child. And so thanks to Kronos, he was able to give them a child, except he gave them an evil child. Now you could say, hey, this is Kronos just being a you-know-what. Because again, most of the Eternals did not like the idea of Eternals having, fun time and having children. And so with that being said, this could be Kronos getting back at his own son in his own evil kind of way. Either way, he does tell Alar, your son will always be an enemy of the Eternals. And so every single time he pops up and an Eternal sees him, they are going to fight him and act like he is a pure enemy that should be killed off. And that is final. But right after that, when you have Alar try to do some more work to hopefully fix his mistakes, unfortunately, Thanos found him. And Thanos said, it's time for you to also die, father. And so just like that, Alar is dead. Now we already know that Alar is not really dead forever. Just instead, he will now be revived back on Earth. And once he is woken up, he is confronted by Icarus and Thena. Now, when it comes to these two characters, they are telling him the bad news like, hey man, listen, your son is evil. You guys done a horrible thing. Your wife, she was resurrected, but she's locked away. And now you are also going to be locked away because you were also exiled for your crimes. But on top of that, you gave birth to Thanos. Not really you, your wife did, but you did help out with the idea of giving birth to Thanos. So thank you for that. You created the most evilest thing in the universe, so you're also excluded. Now, as soon as they do that, he says, please, can I talk to my wife? I know that she was also excluded. And you have Icarus say, no, because she said she does not want to see you at all. Because thanks to you, you seduced her. You gave her a son who is pure evil in this universe. You're like, dang, bro, that's pretty sad. But it only gets worse because apparently his cell, Alar's cell, was made in a certain kind of way. Right now, it's pitch black. But every time Thanos kills someone, a small light will appear to show Alar how many people Thanos kills across the universe. And honestly, it doesn't take that long because as soon as they say that, lights begin to pop up left and right to show how many people Thanos has killed, to the point where the entire room is lit up, to the point where it just destroys the eyes of Alar. And so now he has scars to constantly remind him that he is the reason why Thanos is alive. And this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So guys, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, I'll see y'all next time. Later.